What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the show. Just like every other podcast, hope everybody's had a safe weekend so far. It's a warm one out here in San Antonio, Texas, guys. I was outside a minute ago, and it's getting hot again. But hope everybody's out there safe, having a good time, enjoying the weekend, those type of things. Today we got a good show for you guys. I'm gonna be talking back into the Bryan Kohberger case. I'm gonna give you guys my opinion on some of the things that were out on the Amazon Prime docuseries that just aired out a couple of days ago. Some of the things that I picked up on that I wanted to highlight. I know a lot of people have kind of covered it already and broke it down piece by piece. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to go and talk about some of the highlights that I found interesting. And we're also going to talk about Michael Kohberger, Bryan Kohberger's father. His flight plans were released. It was interesting. In full transparency, I haven't gotten the ones that I was going to release. And so I want to say thank you to Drew Lewis for putting this out there because first and foremost, I don't know how he got them. I don't know if he got them legally or illegally. These aren't the ones that I was going to show you guys. I haven't gotten those yet. And so I have seen them. They are pretty accurate based on what I have been told. But I don't know how he got them and if he got them legally. But thank you, Drew Lewis. We'll talk about it. We'll bring it up and so much more. Without further ado, please hit the like button, subscribe button, ring that notification bell. You guys know what to do. All right. So let's start off first and foremost. We'll start off with the docuseries. My opinion on the docuseries is this is one that was kind of needed, in my opinion. This one kind of focused more so on the victims and not so much on Bryan Kohberger. And I'll be honest, man, it was very, very heartbreaking. Very sad. I highly recommend watching it. Maddie Mogen, her mom, they look identical. They look so identical. But the way her story of how she found out her daughter and also Kaylee had passed, it's just heartbreaking to watch. She basically what ends up happening is Dylan calls some folks in the morning, and she ends up calling Hunter Johnson's girlfriend. I want to say her name was Emily, and basically what Dylan tells him is like, hey, I think something happened last night. I'm not sure. I think I was dreaming, but can you come over and check things out? And they were kind of like laughing it off, like, okay, yeah. I think one of them even said something to the effect like, I'll bring my pepper spray. And they go over, and when they go over, Bethany and Dylan had already gone outside. At this point, they weren't even aware of anything that happened with Kaylee and Maddie up in the third floor. And what ends up happening is they're going through this whole ordeal. They call the police. Hunter goes in there first, and then he comes out as everybody else is kind of barely going in, and he says, call 911, call 911. And he shields them from what he saw. What he had seen was Xana on the floor, and he didn't want the other ladies and the other girls there to see what he had seen. So he protected them from a lot of trauma, a tremendous amount. Hunter Johnson is a hero in this. And what he does is, because he sees what he saw when he walked in and he walked up there, he goes and grabs a knife. Right now, that's not explained there. That's prior knowledge of things that we have known already. But he sees Xana on the floor. He understands what has happened. He tells them being the girls, to call 911. And he says, just call for an unconscious person. So that way he's protecting them from knowing, what happened, or running in there and trying to wake her up and realizing what he had already seen. And so out of fear, because of what he saw, he grabs a knife, goes downstairs, and then he goes back upstairs to make sure what he saw was what he saw, and supply help if he could. And that's why you hear him going, Xana, Ethan, I'm coming up, or whatever the case may be, when he's walking up the stairs. But one thing that I learned out of this is that Hunter Johnson is a hero in this, and he protected those girls from a lot of trauma, more trauma than they already had. You know what I mean? So let's see. The other thing that we found out by Hunter, by Ethan Chapin's brother and sister Hunter and Maisie is that they mentioned that Ethan basically lived there with Xana. That he was there all the time. So those 23 occurrences where Bryan Kohberger is driving by the house late at night and out there for a long period of time, there's a good chance that he was aware and knew that Ethan was staying there. That wasn't a surprise to him, in my opinion. Um, you know, Hunter Chapin kind of goes into details on how he learned about his brother's passing and that he was woken up and told, "Hey, there's cops at the King Road residence," and he was like, "Man, there was a lot of 911 calls. It wasn't something that was in common." And so he goes over there, and they tell him that he's not with them anymore, and he's in disbelief. He calls his mom, and this was very sad. I mean, hearing from the Chapins as well. I mean, all of them. I'm sure when the Netflix series comes out with the Goncalves family, and I'm not sure if the Kernodle family is a part of that one or not. I think they are, but I'm not sure. Um, that one's just going to be as impactful, you know, hearing about some of these individuals and some of the victims' family members and seeing who they are as people and how this case impacted them was gut wrenching, in my opinion. But Hunter calls his mom and can't even tell her that Ethan is no longer there. He has to explain it in a manner like, you know, he's no longer on Earth. And she's in disbelief. Ethan's mom, Stacy, and she calls her husband, and they go through their ordeal as well. Now, back at the King Road residence, it's finally dawning on the people there that Kaylee and Maddie aren't there. So they check their Snapchat, and one of the things that I picked up here is that they said that their phones are pinging inside the house. Now, I thought that to be interesting, that they were able to check the location from outside of the house and were able to tell that the location of Maddie and Kaylee were inside the house. Now, whether they did that, I think off of Snapchat or something else that had their locations, it sounds like that was almost public. So if Bryan Kohberger somehow infiltrated their social media and had access to whatever it is that their friends had access to, he may have been cyber stalking them in many different ways, including where their phones were. Let's see. So nobody is telling them anything about Maddie and Kaylee. The individuals outside, Hunter, his girlfriend, Dylan, Bethany, they all begin to ask the police, you know, is Maddie and Kaylee okay? Are they inside? And they're not given any details. It's not until a vandal alert goes out, and there's two of them that go out. The first one just kind of says that there's a homicide there, and apparently that's when a lot of people it starts to hit at that point. And then a few moments later, there's another vandal alert, and it says that there are 4 murder victims. And that's when most of them realize, and they start yelling and arguing and almost getting into it with the law enforcement officers because they weren't telling them anything. And this is how they found out. Maddie's mom and stepdad were going into town because they had heard that Xana and Ethan may have been victims of an assault, of a deadly assault. And so they were driving into town already. It wasn't even on their mind that Maddie and Kaylee had lost their lives as well. And it wasn't until they got to the police station that they informed them that there were 4 victims and that Maddie and Kaylee were victims of this. The other thing that I noticed is that they spoke to them for long periods of time. And then at the end of it, out of fear, because they didn't know, and they being the police, didn't know why or how, they put a lot of these individuals, a lot of these friends and family members that were there, these youngsters, that lived on King Road in a hotel. This is what something that Bryan Kohberger's attorney had argued was some sort of conspiracy or some sort of um, issue, is that they put them all in a hotel. The reality and their thoughts were, oh, they're gonna share a story, come up with something. In reality, they were so terrified, they were afraid to go home. They were terrified that somebody was going to now break into their home. He left witnesses alive. Could you imagine? There's a guy on the loose. Somebody saw him. Dylan saw him. And now she probably knows that he saw her. In fact, in the docuseries, it talks about Dylan telling her friends that when she saw Kohberger walk by, she got scared and closed the door hard. So he must have at least heard that. He was very close to them. That's why he spins out of there and gets out of there really, really fast. Somebody knows he's there. So she knows he knows, and she don't know who he is at this time, obviously. But can he go back and attack? Can he go back and try to take out the surviving witnesses? And so the fear that they went through throughout this entire process was unimaginable. But that also tells me that they knew very early on that and they being law enforcement again, that the person that committed this crime was an outsider, was not from the small circle of people that they had in front of them. Then it kind of goes into episode 2, which is, it shows about the town in fear, in my opinion. Everybody was scared. Then they started talking about content creators. They bring up several famous content creators, some that are have much more following than I do, and talked about some of the tactics that they used, and not just content creators, but also media. Media was doing a lot of things to try to get interviews and stuff like that. They showed mainstream media reporters out there asking for interviews, and a guy was like, hey, I got to go to class, or whatever the case may be. And I think it was Brian Enton who was interviewing him. So it wasn't just content creators to the sense of social media content creators on YouTube and TikTok and things of that nature. It was across the board. Now, yours truly, myself, Jaime, and Big Blue made an appearance. I wasn't aware that we were going to come out. I had zero idea. In fact, I found out because the members were watching it on Discord. We do every now and then we'll do a watch party, and unfortunately I wasn't there. But one of our mods, Sirius, shout out Sirius, she played it for everybody, and in the second episode they see me. Now, what I had done was what was out already was a 911 calls, a couple of them. The two, one at night, one during the day. And both of them, Hunter Johnson is the same person that comes out. And I pointed out, hey, this guy looks the same. And then I started going through some of the friends on social media of the victims, and I found Hunter Johnson's social media, and I was able to match him to being the same guy. That was the zip tie guy. And I had put that out there, and, it was something that, and obviously now that I probably wouldn't do again, not in the same manner, not without knowing much more information. But I put it out there because at the time there was a lot of people that were having questions, and this guy comes out, he's in both 911 calls. Who's the guy? Now, I had said very early on that I didn't think, well, maybe not very early on, I was probably about 3-4 weeks into it. I said, you know what, I don't think Jack Decor, I don't think Hunter Johnson, I don't think Adam, I don't think a hoodie guy, Jack, I don't think any of these guys had anything to do with this. The reason being is these are people that are in a close circle. These are people that police are aware of. If they're going to commit a crime, there's certain things that have to happen. They have to travel from their location to the victim's house. They have to make entry. There's a lot of things that have to happen. There would be evidence of a car driving around the neighborhood, which we found out later they had, but it was Brian's white Elantra. There would be evidence of them leaving. Think of Chris Watts and what he did and how there was cameras in the neighborhood. Those things would populate. They turned in their phones. From what I understood very early on, they were very cooperative. And so you look at the crime itself as well. It's with a knife. It's a very personal object. So if it was somebody from a inner circle with a knife with a personal object, you're you're leaning to a couple of end results, which is, somebody who's love struck, somebody who's angry. There's very, if it's somebody close with a knife, there's only you can deduce some of the reasoning and kind of point out things. And with Bryan Kohberger, it was personal with a knife because he wanted to feel control and power, and taking somebody's life in that close context. And it's quiet. It's not like a gun, and it can happen very quickly, unlike strangulation. So for him, he used it for other reasons, but it was still personal to him to a certain extent. Now, they weren't personal to him to that extent where it was about hatred or things of that about him. I strongly suspect it was all about Bryan Kohberger, and he probably had hatred towards women, but I don't think any of the victims actually did anything to him. Right? I think this was just in his own head type of thing. But they kind of, so for just kind of, I know I'm rambling a little bit, but just to kind of go back, I didn't think that it was anybody from inside the circle because they hadn't made any arrests. Now, obviously, there are some cases where, it takes a little while. Like, for instance, I think there was this young lady who just got arrested for taking the life of, I want to say it was her father or her parents. I think it was actually her mom and her stepdad. And she did it like she spoke at the eulogy, and it had been 6 months, and then they arrested her. And a lot of that had to do with because they were dealing with another person that was involved, and there was phones and a bunch of other things that were involved in that case as well, that they were waiting to get a bunch of that evidence in. But when it comes to like a murder like this, if it was somebody that they was in the inner circle, it probably wasn't going to take very long to find. And so the fact that they didn't arrest anybody, I had kind of deduced that this was somebody who was outside of the circle fairly early. Let's see. We found out that, before I go forward. So that's what I had done. And, these guys were saying that they felt, and they did it too, because I'm not saying like they did it too in a bad sense. They contacted some of these folks that were on here, contacted law enforcement to tell them who Hoodie Guy was, because they thought it was suspicious who the person who was in the food truck. So they knew who he was, and they contacted people, and come to find out he had a alibi and things of that nature. And so, it's only kind of human nature to kind of question and be suspicious to a certain extent. But for me, they talked about how their life was already hard. And I just felt really horrible that if I made their lives any harder based on, I never really said that, these are the guys that committed the crime. I never said that they were the murderers, never once. But I did shine light on who they were. And if I made their lives any harder, I sincerely apologize. I know I apologized yesterday, but I want to say that again. That's not my intent. My intent here is to be honest, fair, and put the put the right stuff forward. All righty. So then we find out that through Maddie's mom that the Moscow Police Department basically early on called them every day, even if they didn't have much to say. We find out a little bit about that day and what happened. The victim's family and their friends kind of try to piece together what's going on, right? They talk about how they pre-gamed that entire day, and they being Maddie, Kaylee, Ethan, and Xana, Dylan, Bethany, and it was a football game that night, so they had been drinking, they'd been partying. In fact, it seems like some of the stuff that you can see through the windows of the house, the Solo cups, the beer cans, the food, was from the pre-gaming, not necessarily from the party the night before. We find out that Ethan and Hunter and Maisie go to a formal for Maisie, and that at 9 that they leave to Signakai. We find out that Ethan and Xana spent most of their time during the party at Signakai in their in Ethan's brother's room, Hunter, in his room. There was no fight. There was nothing like that. In fact, they had footage of the party that was going on that night, and there was no, like I mentioned, no fight, no arguments, none of those type of things. We find out that David Barry Rocha, a guy that had been attacked by a lot of people online and stuff, just because they were able to figure out who he was. And that was one of the things that I had been talking about throughout this entire case, that a lot of folks who were maybe covering the case or talking about the case were getting this tunnel vision where they were assuming this was like a TV show with a cast, and that everybody in the cast, they have some part in this movie. And not even realizing that there was people outside of the people that we knew, like Bryan Kohberger at the time, right? That could have been responsible. So he actually was a DD driver that night. He wasn't intoxicated. He wasn't drinking. He tells a story that as Ethan and Xana were leaving, Xana kind of mentioned like, "Hey, you need to come to our parties over here." And he's like, "Yeah, I need to." So they were all friendly. They left in a good mood. But again, a lot of people in that neighborhood, this is where the hoodie guy comes up, and how people were able to locate who he was, and people were suspicious about him and reported who he was, things like that. But in the end, he had an alibi and things of that nature. Then they kind of talk about Bryan Kohberger in this docuseries, and they talk about some of the friends that he had, or not even friends, some of the people that he knew. One of the guys who did a report with him said that it was a pleasure to work with him. And then he went on to Ashley Banfield and said the same thing. I thought it was weird. I think it was Ashley Banfield, but I thought it was weird. He's like, that he reinforced that it was such a pleasure to work with him. I get it could have been normal and stuff like that, but it's just a weird way of explaining, working with the guy. If I worked with somebody, and even if it was like a normal interaction, I'm not sure I'd describe, that it was such a pleasure to work with this person. I don't know. It was a weird way of saying it, but he doesn't hide the saying that he's not a pro burger. He thinks that Bryan Kohberger committed the crime. It was just that one thing that kind of just seemed weird, because he then doubled down on it on an outside interview. Yes, Phoenix says the way Macy said that the last thing Ethan texted her was "I love you," which was odd because never said that to one another. Broke my heart. Yeah. It can be a pleasure to work with someone like that, but he still said it. He was off. Yeah, he did say he was off, and that there was sometimes some just random stuff. And he invited him to a party, and Bryan Kohberger told him no, that he was very by himself. He commuted to DeSales, so he drove 70 miles a day back and forth. I think that's one way too. And so we find out that this one other female tried to cheat off of his paperwork, and that was about it. But that he was relatively smart. He was one of the smarter guys that were in the class. So kind of talked a little bit about his intelligence. They talk about the tip on the white Elantra. Now, I'm still kind of struggling about this white Elantra tip, right? Because according to these documents, that they get the tip, or they go out there and they find the white Elantra, WSU officers, on the 25th or the 29th of November. They turn it into Moscow, and Moscow turns away because it's 2015. It's not a 2013 to 2011 Elantra. So they just kind of put it on the shelf, right? They don't look into it. So obviously, if that's true, then that kind of, see, because to me, the reason why it bothers me is just that Uh, if that is true, then definitely it was the IGG or something else that got law enforcement back into to Bryan Kohberger. And I've been saying this for a while. I said that they found out it was him. They got other footage, and then they were able to determine that the vehicle was a 2015, or that they couldn't exclude it. So this would have been a point that Ann Taylor could have made during trial, in my opinion, and this would have been one that may have gone in her favor to a certain extent, that they adjusted the year of the vehicle based on the IGG. Now you can go and look at the vehicle. To me, I don't care what they thought it was. It's what do they think it is now, right? You know, what they initially at one point thought it was a 2019 Sentra, and then they changed it from that. And then they actually thought it could have been a 2014 to 16 Elantra. And then they focused back on the 2011 to 2013 instead, for whatever reason, But for me, it's all right. Once you've had all of the footage and you've seen everything you have, can you exclude it? Can you say that it is for sure not a 15? Is there something on there that says this has to be a 13 Elantra? And if not, and you can't exclude it, and now with all the newer footage that's come out, because remember, when a crime happens, all the evidence isn't sitting there on a desk in chronological order and everything else documented, saying, hey, here's the footage that you need to determine what kind of car this is. This is a living investigation. It's moving. It is constantly being worked on. There's things that are being added to it. So by the time you get to trial and you have all your evidence, and you have not just 1, 2, 3 pieces of footage. Now you have, multiple pieces of footage from the same street, from, the same different angles and things of that nature. Now, can you tell me it's what it is and what it's not? And obviously, Ann Taylor and her defense team were not able to say that it was not a 2015. They that was used in evidence. They wanted that thrown out. It wasn't. It was going to be used. Now, whether that piece of evidence came from Ridge Road or wherever, they got it, and they were able to determine it was his car. But the 2011 to 13 Elantra are so much similar. They're so similar. You can barely tell the difference. But they talk about how they, kind of turned away from that. Now, to me, it's interesting because when I had Howard Bloom on, he talks about how on December 12th, they still had no idea who left the DNA on the sheath. There was 4 brothers that they wanted to go and look at, I believe. There was 4 brothers who were like distant relatives of Bryan Kohberger that they needed some more information on. And without it, they couldn't move forward. And so what ended up happening is the FBI takes over. They submit it into, I believe it was Heritage, which the big whole thing about it was that Heritage had this rule that they wouldn't allow law enforcement to look into it unless there's some backdoor rule that they have, that unless there's like a serious crime or whatever the case may be. Well, anyways, they go through there, and this starts December 12th, December 13th. This is the exact same time that Bryan Kohberger is on his route with his father to Albrightsville, Pennsylvania. Now we know that at this time the FBI is acquiring a warrant, and we know this from Cy Ray and his testimony. They're acquiring a warrant to try to locate Bryan Kohberger's location. They know who he is at this point. Now, Moscow Police Department don't know who Bryan Kohberger is at this point because they don't get his name back from the IGG until December 19th. So my question is, the IGG didn't come back till December 19th, and I understand maybe perhaps the FBI got it a little bit earlier than that, but how much earlier could they have gotten it? If the IGG was taken over by the FBI on December 12th and December 13th, they still had to submit that DNA. Now, submitting that DNA doesn't come back with a person unless that person who submitted their DNA was Bryan Kohberger. Unless Bryan Kohberger submitted his DNA to Heritage, or somebody very close, a sister or a dad or a mom, somebody super close to him, because it doesn't come out with a name, it comes out with a group of people, relatives. Now, unless it's somebody super close, they still have to work through that. And I think it's relatively fast. So I know there's been rumors and speculation. I don't know how true they are. I know that, well, let me rephrase this. I know that there was a tip to the FBI made by one of Bryan Kohberger's sisters. That's what I have heard. And I don't know exactly when it happened. I know the name that she used, but I don't know exactly when it happened. I'm told it was close to the Bolo. Now, I've not seen it myself, so I can't tell you for sure. But Howard Bloom wrote in an airmail article that Steve was going to make contact with somebody that had some sort of tip, and that this was found out through grand jury, and that the FBI stopped him from making contact with this person because that person made a tip through the FBI tip line, an anonymous tip of some sort. Okay. Now, I don't know if that's true or not. I've never asked Steve this question. It's one of those questions kind of like Ann Taylor and Bryan Kohberger's alibi, something I don't want to know the answer to. You know what I mean? I've never asked Steve about it because I didn't want to know the answer to it. I don't know if it's true or not. And I can say that I don't know. You know what I mean? But if it is true, if Howard Bloom's writing is true about that scenario, that there was somebody that they were about to get in touch with and the FBI stopped them because this person reported it through an FBI tip line, wouldn't that kind of make sense why the FBI was maybe trying to follow Bryan Kohberger between December 13th and 16th and were onto him by that time? You know, I think that kind of makes sense, but I don't know for a fact. I don't know. I do know, like I said, that one of his sisters did contact the FBI and may have reported that there's suspicions. You know, that's as far as that goes. But you know, we'll talk about Bryan Kohberger's dad's flight records here in a little bit. But just kind of food for thought there, guys, real quick on that aspect. Then they talk about Papa Roger in the docuseries. And they kind of go into how they believe Papa Roger may be Bryan Kohberger. They talk about some of the terms that they were using, some of the questions that Papa Rogers was asking, how he was getting defensive. And we had Alina Smith, who's been on the show just recently on the show. In fact, we had like almost 40,000 views on the last show where we were talking about some things yesterday, actually. Thank you guys for all tuning into that. She was on the Amazon Prime docuseries and talking about Papa Roger. And I tell you guys, I'm about 90 to 95%. Okay, maybe it is Papa Roger. Now, what doesn't, and here's also why I think it could be, because in the docuseries they talked to the student that was in class with Bryan Kohberger, who said it was a pleasure to work with him. He mentioned that Elliot Rodger was a guy that they studied and that Bryan Kohberger wasn't disturbed by, and that Bryan Kohberger seemed interested in. And you have Papa Roger spelled kind of the same. The people, or the if you look at not the people, Bryan Kohberger's profile picture, and you look at Papa Roger's profile picture as well, it looks very eerily similar. It looks like Bryan Kohberger. He's a Russian soldier. You know, these murders happen in Moscow, which is most famous, Moscow being Russia. And the name Papa Roger, which is like Father Roger, you know, like kind of interesting, right? Now, we had the conversation yesterday with Dr. Vona and Alina Smith, and I was telling them, I was like, look, if Bryan Kohberger was Papa Roger, he's an incel. You know, if he, I know that a lot of people want to say that that his, I know, and I get it, that he was super intrigued by Ted Bundy. He wanted to be Ted Bundy. This wasn't Papa Theodore, Papa Bundy, it's Papa Roger. And now that's kind of the reason why I'm a little bit questionable if it is the same guy, because I do think that Bryan Kohberger was influenced by Bundy more so based on the things that we've seen, based on the cosplay that he did. He dressed up like Bundy in the thumbnail, based on many of his searches were for Ted Bundy. Now, we don't know what his other searches for. He may have had other searches for Elliot Rodger, but I just feel that Dateline would have, maybe have known some of those things. Like if the main search was for Elliot Rodger, and that's why I was thinking to myself, well, that would make sense if he was constantly like searching Elliot Rodger stuff and continually searching Elliot Rodger, and he's calling himself Papa Roger. All right, that makes sense. So to me, if he ends up being Papa Roger, which it kind of sounds like he might be, then I would definitely say that he is an incel. One of the things they also mentioned is that Bryan Kohberger's apartment was like super clean, right? And that he had no clothes in his apartment. He had nothing in there. He didn't have a shower curtain either. That they didn't feel like he was going to go back. Now, he had left some things there. He had left a fire stick. He left a couple of receipts and a tag for Dickies, which I found kind of weird to leave those things behind if you weren't going to go back. You know what I mean? Unless, well, I don't know. But those were the things that he left behind. I assumed he was going to go back. I thought he would be, but I don't know. This is also what we talk about, how we find out that Dylan had closed the door hard, because it kind of goes back and forth here. And also talks about that Dylan had called Bethany after a few times and she had answered, and Bethany said she didn't hear anything. So she was not aware of anything that happened in that house. So for a lot of folks that were wondering if she saw somebody naked outside, she must have heard this, must have heard that. Based on the documentary, Bethany did not hear anything. And then talks more about Elliot Rodger and stuff like that. And overall, and that's kind of the new stuff, or the stuff that I pointed out that I wanted to cover. And overall, I thought that the docuseries was great. You guys got to watch it. It's super impactful. But those were the highlights that I wanted to point out of that I found from this docuseries. Well put together, heartbreaking, guys, heartbreaking, gut-wrenching. You really feel for the victims, and for those that attack victims and their family members. I just don't see how they could do that, especially when you see the pain that they're going through. You may not agree with what they say or whatever the case may be, but some people go way too far. And I just don't understand how people can attack folks that are hurting like that. It's really kicking somebody while they're down. And I don't know how they sleep at night. I don't know how they, have no morals, no ethics. All right, let's see. Were DM and BF interviewed in the series? No, they weren't. They were not. Thank you, Didi Fuentes, coming in with one gifted Drunk Turkey Show membership, and then does it again. Thank you so much. Thank you. Do you think some of the initial mishaps was because a lot of a different law enforcement, state, and local police and FBI involved, like who's really in charge, even though Moscow claimed it? I don't think so. I don't know what mishaps were there. There was a guy who was trained as in investigating, and obviously had a lot of forethought of how an investigation is done, and meticulously planned this out. Now, I would agree with you if, for instance, they were chasing somebody like maybe one of the alternate suspects, right, that Ann Taylor brought up. If they were going after somebody and not looking at the evidence and missed this, right? Maybe that was something that Bryan Kohberger was kind of hoping they would do. They would target one of the ex-boyfriends or something in there. That way they can focus on them and not on what he had done. But that wasn't the case. It seems like they were early on aware that this was an outsider. This was somebody who wasn't this was a serial killer type of person that had targeted this house. It sounds like they knew that fairly early, and they had the DNA on the sheet. They had to wait for that IgG to come back, and in the meantime, they had the white car, and so they were going through that, trying to figure that out. But I mean, the only thing that I think they blundered up in the beginning is not opening it up to a 2016 Elantra. The search, and maybe perhaps if it is true that they saw Bryan Kohberger's car and said 2011 to 16, that was a 2016, didn't match the 2011 to 13. They're like, nah, just put it off to the side. That might be the biggest blunder that they had. But in the end, I don't think that to be the case, to be honest with you guys. I just think that they had a lot of tips that were coming in, and they probably were pushing up the 2011 to 13 Elantras to the top of the line. I don't think they turned them away. A 2015 Elantra. I don't think that's going to be the case. All righty. So without further ado, let's get into these flight logs. So I want to thank Drew Lewis for putting these out. I think his effort was I think he was trying to put this out before I did. I'm glad he did, because I wasn't gonna put anything out today. I didn't get the documents that I was looking for. I've heard about these documents. I've not seen them. This is the first time I saw them earlier when he posted them, but I think they're pretty accurate based on the stuff that I know. I don't know how he got these, if he got them legally or not. So if something happens, Mr. Lewis here is the guy, Drew. If you guys are looking for, how he obtained them, this is the person you want to ask. But he obtained these. These are not the ones that I have, but I think these are interesting. So let's go through them. So the next few pictures that I have are taken from Drew Lewis's post. So let's see. This is an Alaskan airline ticket, which I had told you guys that I had heard that it was an Alaskan airline ticket. Again, these are his. I can't validate everything on here. Don't know how true they are. Based on the information that I know, this seems to be pretty accurate. I mean, down to the times and everything else. So it's very similar to what I think I'm eventually going to get, but I don't have these. These are not the documents that I was going to share, but I'm glad that Mr. Lewis shared them. Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Again, if anybody's looking to sue somebody about how they got these private records out, Mr. Lewis will be the man you're looking for. So thank you, Mr. Lewis. All right, so confirmation code HVQNSD. This is a flight, Alaskan airline, Boeing 737 from Philadelphia at 4:50 p.m. to Seattle at 7:58 p.m. Then he was to board Alaska Airline at 10:50 p.m. to Pullman Moscow Airport at 11:59 p.m. on December 11th. These were paid by mileage plan. Ooh, wrong button. Try to highlight that. So these are by miles, as I said. These are miles, and it appears that this was purchased Michael Kohberger on December 10th, 2022. 40,000 miles have been redeemed for mile plan, blah. So this is a one-way trip, 40,000 miles, and you got to pay for the taxes when you do this. So he's paying $5.60 to get this taken care of. I wonder, my first thoughts are, I highly doubt that this is Michael Kohberger's miles. I'm thinking his successful daughters that fly a lot, probably to fly home and stuff. I have no idea if they fly a lot or not. But I'm going to assume, this is my assumption here, that his more successful daughters probably do fly more than he does, probably do invest in some flyer miles. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's how he ended up getting out there. But that's just pure speculation. Pure speculation. But here it is, guys. He purchased this December 10th. Now, I know that because of weather-related incident or weather-related issues, that the Pullman Washington Airport was closed. They couldn't get through there. However, hold on, guys, this is making some noise. Sorry about that. However, they end up flying him out to Spokane, Washington. Now, look at that. 9:34 p.m. on December 12th is when he arrives. 9:34. Now, Alina made a good point yesterday. She thinks that they drove directly from here out. They left. Now, I know that in the probable cause affidavit, it states that he was seen in Colorado off of a license plate reader, Loma, Colorado. I wonder what time that was. If that was early, like earlier than, I don't know, because I think it's some 9 hours away or something like that. So, if it's before noon when that happens, that tells you that they drove directly from the airport. This guy flew from Seattle cross country, spent the night in the airport, possibly, and then didn't fly out until the next night, gets to Spokane at 9:34. It would have been midnight by the time they would have gotten to Pullman. Let's just say he goes to Pullman. It would have been midnight by the time he gets to Pullman, which I suspect probably is the case, right? Why do I suspect that to be the case? Because according to the docuseries, his apartment complex was spotless, clean. No, not even a shower curtain. Nothing there. Now, obviously, he could have put everything in a trash can in the morning on his way out and cleaned up. But if they're leaving early, you would expect there'd be something. Maybe the father took a shower or something. Damp towels and dryer. I mean, something, right? Nothing. It was as if spotless. So I wonder if she's right about that they drove immediately from that airport, him flying for 2 days, and then go directly from that airport, pick up cross country. Sure does sound like Mr. Kohberger, and I'm talking about Bryan Kohberger, got real spooked about that bolo, about that Elantra, and wanted that car out of there as fast as possible. Now, here's the other kicker, right? So they didn't charge him anything on this one. All right. And here it says no charge, previous ticket number. Right. So we know that that Bryan Kohberger's family had kind of planned for Bryan Kohberger to go out there, to go home. He was going to go home for the winter break. Now, I thought maybe there's a chance that Michael Kohberger had a flight planned out later, because had he gotten there on time, he would have been there Sunday, December 11th at 11:59 p.m. They were planning to jet off the first day of finals. The finals started December 12th. That was the plan at this point, was to get out of there by December 12th. If they would have planned this earlier, how would Bryan Kohberger's dad know to plan to land early, that his son was going to get fired? Right now, maybe perhaps. Well, here's the other thing. They didn't cancel or transfer anything, right? I don't see that here, because it would have said previous ticket. It would have said, they wouldn't have been, there might have been a charge for the taxes because they were moving it up. But there's no previous ticket here or anything like that to say that this flight was changed from a later date, moved up. This is a completely new flight, purchased December 10th to fly out December 11th. to get out there extremely fast. Now, maybe Bryan Kohberger called his dad, said, "Hey, I got fired." And this could be his manipulation. It could be. "I got fired and they hate me here. I just want to go home. Blah, blah, blah. Come pick me up." But if he had already had arrangements to be in Pullman or in Albrightsville, you're going to go out there and spend 40,000 of your tickets of your miles to go pick him up. It's just weird, right? Now, what does kind of make sense is maybe perhaps the initial plan was for Bryan Kohberger to fly back home and then fly back to Pullman. But now there's a bolo, right? There's a bolo out now. And so now he needs to get his car out of there. So maybe he does kind of manipulate his folks. But here's the thing. The FBI were onto him. They were following him on that trip, and they had just submitted his DNA into Heritage. It takes a couple of days at least for that to come back. But they're onto him already. I think somebody tipped off the FBI about that trip. And I think that's why they were looking for him so early. Remember, new ticket, previous ticket. It's not on here. This is a new plan. Now, the other thing we know is that Bryan Kohberger's car is inside the garage. We see Michael Kohberger's car, or Kohberger's household car, on drone footage outside of the garage in the driveway. We also know, based on the closing statements or the case statement by Bill Thompson, that when they got into the garage, there was a bucket full of cleaning, some kind of cleaning material in it, solution to clean the house, to clean his car, and that his car was meticulously clean everywhere. So Michael Kohberger goes out there, immediately buys a ticket from one day to the next, flies out there, has to stay the closest he can get is Spokane. So he flies there in the middle of the night. It's possible either then or very early the next day, which is still pretty weird, right? Like if they would have gone back to Bryan's house, let's just say that was the case, that they went back to Bryan's house, his apartment. How early are they flying? Or are they traveling out? I mean, it's already midnight. You know, this guy's already been traveling for days. I feel bad for Michael Kohberger on this, for his traveling there. You know, if he had zero knowledge that his son had done something, then yeah, you know, he treated him like crap. I don't buy that though. I don't buy it. Just don't buy it. You know, that he buys a ticket so fast to get out there, even if they had plans. Even if they, you know, if he had already had plans, whether that plan be he was going to fly out there at the end of the week, or Bryan Kohberger was going to fly across country. He decided to change them and go on December 10th, purchase a ticket for December 11th. And this is, to me, a new ticket. This is on January 20th, 2023. And I believe this is the one where he's supposed to be traveling back. So if there is any evidence that Michael Kohberger didn't know at the time when he purchased the plane ticket that Bryan Kohberger committed this murders, this would be it. Because this kind of says that he was intending for Bryan Kohberger to go back. He was going to take that drive with him and then fly home. If this ends up being the case. But something's weird, right? Because you have it confirmed here, and then you have it confirmed here. This one's only once. I don't know. And then here's the confirmation for his flight to it's switching it from Pullman to Spokane. That's on the 12th. Look at this one. This one's interesting. It says 12:13. Michael, get ready for Philadelphia. That one's weird. Now, that one was what I was thinking. All right, maybe he had a flight prepared. Maybe he had a flight prepared for December 13th. That would make more sense, right? To fly out there on the red eye on the 16th, on the 13th. You're getting there at midnight. That's the end of the week. The 16th is the last day of finals. You have basically you fly out there, the 13th. You take the 14th of rest or whatever, then take off together on the 15th or the 16th. That kind of makes sense. But, typically, I mean, I don't know. I've never flown through Alaskan Airlines, so I'm not sure if Michael get ready for Philadelphia is like get ready for the terminal and all that other stuff. Typically, like if I was flying out somewhere, I fly a lot to Pittsburgh. It'll tell me get ready for Pittsburgh. Not necessarily get ready for San Antonio, the first airport that I'm going to. But I've never flown Alaskan Airline. So could this, get ready for Philadelphia on the 13th be for a flight that was initially planned a little bit later on in the week? And this one's one that says, sorry, your flight's been canceled. And then this is the confirmation, right? So this is where the flight was canceled to Pullman. And this is where he's got the next day he's going to Spokane. Now, a lot of these say Michael. This says Michael, confirmation. This tells me that, you know what? I think I was wrong. I think this tells me that he is the flyer. November red already. Here's your statement. $29 one-way fare. So maybe he is the actual. I may have been wrong there. He may be the guy that has the miles. I mean, 40,000 miles is a lot. That's quite a bit. But kind of goes to the urgency, right? Talks about the urgency. J Mofo comes in with a membership for 1 month. Thank you, J Mofo. Thanks for the mods. Thank you. $3 super chat. Yes, our mods are amazing. Our mods are definitely amazing. If you guys have any questions at this point, please put a couple of stars. I'll answer them as many as I can. You guys tell me what you guys think. What do you guys think about this? Again, I have no way of validating where this guy got this information. These are not the documents that I have. Again, I want to thank Drew Lewis for putting this out there. I don't know where he got this information. I don't know how he gathered this information. I don't know if he hacked the Kohberger email or something like that. I don't know what he did, but he's the one that threw these out there. I have no way of validating these, but I will say that they sound accurate based on the information I was told. It's down, and it's pretty dang accurate. It's down to the T. So I don't know where he got it from, but he put them out there. So thank you, Drew Lewis, for putting this out there for everybody to see. Without you, we wouldn't have seen these today. You can buy miles. Yeah, but I mean, even if you buy miles, I don't know. You're right. You can't buy miles. It can be less expensive if you were like at 20,000 miles and you needed 20. It might be less expensive to buy the miles and purchase the entire ticket. But I mean, even at that, if you're buying miles, wouldn't that show up on the receipt? I've never bought miles before, so I don't know. I know that it's a possibility. I do know it's a possibility. I just don't know if that would be on the receipt here, like 40,000 miles and purchase of miles was X amount of money. I would assume there'd be a receipt for that. I would think it'd be on the receipt here. Let's see. Put a couple of stars, guys, if you're going to be, if you ask me that way. That way I know you're talking to me and not to somebody else. Has anyone heard that? Oh, geez, I have no idea. I don't want to talk about that. Or him, to be honest. Axel Weasel, is all this information about the travel dates for possible civil case, MK accountability? I don't know. This is the first time I see these from this avenue. I have been aware of these. I have spoken with people who have seen the documents, and I think I've seen some of these being passed around, but I couldn't tell how accurate they were until I verified that the information's pretty accurate. I mean, it's down to the T. I mean, I told you guys that he paid $560, used 40,000 points, bought it on the 10th, left on the 11th, got stuck in Seattle, and then had to change his route to Spokane. So it's very on point with the information that I have. But this is not the documents I was going to release today. I haven't gotten this. They didn't come in. And so if not for Drew Lewis, we wouldn't be watching these today. You can get a lot of miles with credit card spending. Yeah, you can. You definitely can. But supposedly this family's broke, so I don't know how much spending they're doing, but that could be some people that misuse their credit cards too, and so that could be another thing. I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know how they spend or don't spend. Do we know if BK went back to the port of Idaho between the murders, and when he left for PA, the prosecutor said he visited the afternoon of the murders? Some killers do that. He visited the morning of the murders. A few hours later at 9 a.m., he went back. The port of Idaho between the murders and when he left PA. Now, if you're talking about back to the residence, I know a lot of serial killers and killers will do that. They'll revisit the crime scene. According to the PCA, he only went back once, and that was at 9 a.m. After that, I think he only connected to a tower in Moscow one time, but they don't believe that he was in Moscow. All right, I got about 2 minutes, guys, and then I got to call this one a show. So let's see. Anyone try to FOIA the jail calls yet, like people have done in the Soto Stearns case? I have a team, and my team has done some FOIAs to see what BK was talking about with his family on the phone from jail. Do you know when BK interview is going to come out? Sorry if I missed it. I think it's fake, guys. A lot of people are saying that it was not real. Now, I have heard that there was or is possibly an interview with his sisters or his family to set the record straight or whatever, that they had nothing to do with it. But that's Bryan Kohberger talking. No, it's not real, unfortunately. And maybe fortunately. I think he's going to be selective on who he talks to. That's why I brought in Dr. Vona and Elena Smith last night to talk about, hey, does this sound right? Does this sound like something he would do? And Dr. Vona was skeptical. I was skeptical when they said the term set the record straight. I was like, what are you talking about? Like, and I knew that there was possibly like an interview with some of the Kohberger family members. And Elena had heard of it too, going back some months, but nothing with Bryan Kohberger. So it was a little bit of a surprise when that came out. And unfortunately, it was not true. What's going on? Serious member for 17 months. Thank you. Shout out for Big Blue and Jaime. Yeah, been a member for 25 months. Thank you, Afton. Big Blue and Jaime, they were shocked that they were also on the Prime. And thank you, Canadian True Crime Buff, also coming in with a 27-month membership. You guys are amazing. I appreciate every one of you guys. I'm going to call it a show, guys. I got some things I do need to do. So Kohberger was emulating a lot of SKs. He had no sense of self. That is 100% true. I 100% agree with that. Let's see. There's one last thing I want to do real quick before I forget. But I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I want to thank everybody for being here. You guys are amazing. I'll be back maybe tomorrow. Do a members only. So hit the join button. Get in the Discord. You guys know what to do. Until next time. Peace out.
But it's too late now. I remember you and me, and how careless we could be.
All day and all night, we'd stay up, it felt so right. We were so young, we were so dumb. We would get drunk and then hook up. We were okay, we were alright, staying awake till the sunrise. We were in love, couldn't stop us, like a good drug, never enough. We hook up in my car, driving so far, play you guitar, you'd show me your art, let down our guards, think with our hearts, stare at the stars. We were never apart, drinking too young, way too much fun, out in the sun, or rain when it's gone. Took you to prom, dance to our song, dance all night long till the lights come on. Now I remember everything, and how careless we could be, and how careless we could be.